Well, hello, everyone. This is, excuse me, this is the beginning of Letters on Occult Meditation Program 20, and it is page 73, The Fundamental Centers. Now, I'm not going to show the image because it's the sun's rays are too bright, so we'll wait until later on that. And yeah, we'll begin right here on page 73, program 20, and today, yes, being the 11th day of August, 2020. The three fundamental centers of vital importance from the standpoint of the average man, polarized in his emotional body and living the normal life of the man in the world, are the base of the spine, the solar plexus, and the heart center. Now, if we were to turn to page 170, okay, so this would be a treatise on cosmic fire. I think we might see something of the same. It would be the base of the spine, the heart, and let me get this up here for you. 169. The base of the spine, the solar plexus, and the heart. So he mentions the same in what we are now studying. Okay. So this is the average man. Now we go back to the text. The base of the spine, the solar plexus, and the heart, and I'm going to say, look at TCF at 169. The three major centers for a man nearing the probationary path, and for the man who is aiming at a life of altruism, thinking of others, having examined the attractions of the three worlds, are the base of the spine, the heart, and the throat. So this indicates more of a mental focus. And then his solar plexus is left then to normal functioning, having served its purpose as a center for emotional focusing. Now, I sometimes use the word focus and sometimes polarization. What we have to understand is that focus is a lesser term than polarization. A person can be mentally focused and yet not completely mentally polarized, which happens between the second and third initiation, and liberates him to tread the path of Syrian initiation, which means the path which Sirius influences in our initiation system, rather than the path of Mahat, which is strictly intelligent and selfish along the way, leading at length to the Black Lodge. The activity of the fire becomes more centered in the throat, and there we have, thus we have a new form of creativity rather than strictly procreativity. Of course, you can be focused in the sacral center and not, not especially procreative. That's how far things have gone, that the major function of the sacral center has been forgotten by millions or is put to the side. Okay, the three major centers for the man on the path itself, in its twofold divisions are the heart, the throat, and the head. Now, let's see how that compares with page 169 and 170. Let's go there. And here we are. The heart, the throat, and the head. And four of the head centers plus the Alta center are involved. And next we will have heart and throat and the 7 head centers, which rule the spiritual man to the 3rd initiation. Okay, now we go back again. So he does not specify the 2 divisions. One division involving 5 centers, and the other 7. And taking us to the 3rd initiation. The divine activity has developed the solar plexus center, is controlling all the centers below the solar plexus, and is passing upward in ordered progression until it is focused and vivifying the head centers. How many? Maybe 10 or still more, maybe 21. If we perhaps consider 21 or 14, if we consider the 7 centers within the head, and we also consider the ajna, the head center, and the alta, and as well the ajna series of centers, we get a higher count than otherwise. I'll show you here from another book, the ajna series of centers. So here, let's see how far we can go. I think I'll have to find still another drawing, and I'll do that here in a moment. And here they are. It's called the Ajna System. It's from a Hindu book on the chakras, and we see there is a monastic center, a Buddhic center, It says Mahananda, so that means great bliss. There is a nirvanic center, which maybe connects with the atmic plane. A couple of tiny centers, Visarga, and the Guru Chakra and the Great Chakra, which we call the Sahasrara Chakra, or Mahan. So this is an ajna system, and there seem to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah. That's how it would work, excluding the ajna center. All right, going back now. So the solar plexus, which controls so much of the life of the average man, is controlling now the subdiaphragmatic centers, and its energy is passing upward in ordered progression until it is focused and vivifying the head centers. And we've just taken a little look at what at least some of those may be. Okay. Earlier, we divided the life of the man into 5 main periods. Okay. Looks like here we can have a little bit more for the moment of the image. I don't know whether it helps or doesn't help, but sometimes it makes me feel that I'm communicating with you more directly. Okay. Earlier, we divided the life of the man into 5 major periods, tracing his development in each. Now remember that the number 5 is not only the cyclic number of the second ray, but it is a Brahmic number and relates to the previous solar system. And I might say to a scale of music which represents the previous solar system, the pentatonic scale. We have the number 7 having to do with this solar system, and the number 9 with the coming solar system, 21 in all. And if we count the entirety as a unit, then we have the special number, number 22. So we might, if we are careful to generalize widely, apply the same to the 5 centers. I wonder, I'm trying to remember, the period, the 5 periods in man. And if you look at the egoic lotus, you can somewhat see them. We might say the hall of ignorance, the hall of learning, the hall of wisdom, the hall of, I'm going to call it the hall of synthesis for the synthesis petals, and then centralization within the jewel in the lotus. Now, of course, you can count differently, but for sure we pass through a long period of ignorance of a higher self. Then we learn that there is such a thing as a higher self. Then we sacrifice the lower self for the higher self. And then we begin to see the synthesis of all factors around us as the Buddhically generated synthesis petals open and finally burst open right before the 4th initiation. And then we have at the same time a kind of focus within the jewel in the lotus. Now, the question is, has that jewel been destroyed at the fourth initiation, or has it been relocated? There is an intriguing idea that the jewel in the lotus is located exactly between the higher mental plane and the lower Buddhic plane. How that could occur, has simply to be vibrational. If we think of position as stratified, it's not going to make a lot of sense. But in terms of frequency, it could make sense. And when the average man, with the frequency of his causal body related to the frequencies of the matter of the third subplane, changes to second subplane frequencies, then we say the egoic lotus is focused on the second subplane. And maybe the jewel in the lotus takes up a frequency which places it at the highest frequency of the first subplane of the mental plane and the lowest frequency of the seventh, or the frequency of the lowest or seventh subplane. That I have yet to work out, and probably all of us have to work it out. So earlier we divided the life of man into 5 main periods. And we can do it this way too. We can, well, I think, in terms of the periods, it's best if we deal with the petals of the egoic lotus rather than with the atomic triangle of mental unit, astral permanent atom, and physical permanent atom. I think it's better because it definitely, in a tightening spiral, gives you the sense of relative duration. The 777 symbolic incarnations are 700 plus 70 plus 7, giving you an idea of time spent within the hall of ignorance, time spent within the hall of learning, and time spent on the path of probation. I think left out of that number 777 are incarnations which take you through accepted discipleship and into, finally, into what we actually call initiation. Okay. So he's going to now analogize. Using a 5-fold division. Okay. Period 1. Yeah, in other words, we've looked at human living in relation to the petals of the egoic lotus and the jewel. Of course, if we want to divide the egoic lotus into 5 sections, I'll put that here. We can divide the egoic lotus into 5 sections as follows, but they're not necessarily all of them temporally distinct. The atomic triangle, the knowledge petals, the love petals, the sacrifice petals, And then the synthesis, petals, and jewel as one. That's a fivefold division. But as I say, temporally, it's not exactly correct, because the threefold atomic triangle is developing in a parallel manner with the opening of the knowledge petals, love petals, and sacrifice petals. So you find the same time period reflected in both the atomic triangle and the ninefold petal system in different ways. The reflection occurs in different ways. And then we move beyond the atomic triangle altogether into the synthesis petals, which are Buddhic, and whether we consider the synthesis petals and the jewel as one or separately, the atomic quality is there with respect to the jewel. So it's the presence of attenuated monadic will on the higher mental plane in the structure of the jewel in the lotus. Probably seems to us, maybe a lot to remember or to, whoa, uh-oh, okay. Something has happened there. Something has happened, and I'm just going to, goodness me, pause here. Okay, friends, I had a little mishap there. As you probably saw, some function began to devour all my words and the Tibetan's words. So I had to go back and see what I could reconstruct. So any hope of timing this particular program is no longer possible. But anyway, I have found that it's better to keep going even if little mishaps occur along the way, because there's only so much time in which to really to make these recordings. And when I sacrifice time to mechanics, it's not a good use of the time, I think. So sorry for the un-seventh ray appearance of things at times. It was real chaos there for a few minutes until I turned everything off. But okay, let's see where we are now. Earlier, we divided the life of the man into 5 main periods, tracing his development in each. Now, what would those periods be? The undeveloped man, sorry, and the advanced man, the aspirant, the disciple of many kinds, and the initiate. That might be one way to divide them, and accordingly, we divide according to the way the egoic lotus is opening. So that's one method. And you might want to check out Esoteric Astrology, page 332 and 333, for some correlations there about the undeveloped man, the advancing man, and the disciple initiate. So he says we might, if we are careful, we might apply the same to the 5 centers. And okay, which 5 will we use? We've been seeing how we can leave the sacral center out and combine the head center and ajna center from another perspective here. So I'm going to from another perspective, we omit the sacral center and combine the ajna center and head center. That's one way of arriving at the 5. So let's see what he says. Let's apply the same idea of periods to the 5 centers. Okay. I'm reminded of Walt Disney's Sorcerer's Apprentice. You know, the sorcerer went away and left Mickey Mouse control over the home and the laboratory and so forth. And poor Mickey Mouse, he got his spirit of adventure up, and he began to work magic. And the next thing he knew, he was having the brooms carry the buckets of water. You may remember that. It's kind of an iconic cartoon from early days. And these buckets of water, the brooms multiplied, the buckets of water multiplied, and before you know it, he was inundated. As I was watching my text disappear, I had the feeling of being in a similar situation. All right, period 1, where in the base of the spine is the most active in the purely rotary sense and not 4th dimensional. Why? Because later, the base of spine center is very important in high developments, even unto the 5th initiation. So here's the base of the spine in purely rotary sense, okay, which tells us something about simply sustaining the body with vitality. And I think, well, you know, what can I use here? That, maybe green. Well, I think I'll use red. Let's see how this would work. And let's get this, stop highlighting, and we'll make this into a red. But the purely rotary motion, the purely rotary sense will make into the green of the 3rd ray. The inner fire is focused on the vivification of the organs of generation, just as is the sacral center, and on the functional physical life of the personality. So it's simply a matter of sustainment. Okay. The next period, wherein the solar plexus is the goal of the attention of the fire, and when the emotional counterpart vibrates synchronously. And we remember that the sacral center is eliminated in the enumeration we are using. So here is the solar plexus, and enlarging that just a bit. The sacral center is vivified, and it is at first, interestingly, the home of the mental elemental, whereas the solar plexus, the emotional elemental, and the base of the spine, the physical elemental. But in this enumeration, the sacral center is left out of the picture. Two centers are thus vibrating even though the measure be slow. And we might say they have to vibrate in order to sustain life in form. The others are alive. Pulsation can be seen, but there is no circular movement, so circular movement is a more advanced stage than pulsation in this respect. Remember, our whole solar system is based upon rotary motion. The color green, the third ray, the note Fa, the subdominant, as it's called in music. It's a preparation for the power of the dominant note, the G, the blue, which is active in our present solar system. So he's giving us a fivefold division. You know, I do so wish that my computer skills were such that when the computer suddenly starts to blow up, I could catch it before a half hour is required just to get back to the point where I found myself when that Pac-Man activity began. And I still don't know why it began. Maybe someone will write me and let me know. Then, period 3, the divine fire now mounts to the heart center, and the three rotate in ordered, measured unison. These words, you know, as so many words that DK uses, are not carelessly selected. He thinks very carefully exactly about the word he's using and its implications. Okay. Ordered, measured unison, base of the spine, solar plexus, and heart. I would say, you know, along with the head center, those are centers involved in the political work. Usually the solar plexus is eliminated, but after all, one has to enthuse the voting public and stimulate their idealism. Solar plexus is very helpful in that. But we're still, shall we say, dealing with emotional man here because the head center is not involved. He goes on, I would point out that the vivification of any one center causes an accession of force in all. And, this has, does it not? This has implications for group work. Vivify one member and others become more vital. And I would further point out that in the head are 7 centers. Now that's a preposition in, not on. We noticed earlier that he sometimes used the preposition on with regard to the centers in relation to a vehicle. Here it's in the head. 3 major, 4 minor, a usual type of division, except when dealing with planes, where we often have 4 etheric and 3 more material. So I would further point out that in the head are 7 centers, 3 major and 4 minor, and that these centers directly correspond to one or other center in the body. And these are control centers having to do with the will and with the planet Vulcan. So, the spiritual will has not yet been appropriated by humanity the way it will be, nor has Vulcan been discovered yet by humanity. Certainly the masters know where it is, and especially those that are trained in esoteric astrology. They are the synthesists, and on the stimulation of their corresponding center, receive themselves a corresponding acquisition of rotary power. The greater the rotary frequency or cycle, the more powerful the center and its influence. Okay, period 4 marks the definite stimulation of the throat center. Now, this would be called man mentally focused. All the creative activity of the threefold man, physical, emotional, and mental, is turned upward in service, and let us say, and in a creative approach to service, and his life begins occultly to sound, which is natural enough, something we would expect, given that we are speaking of the sounding center. Whoa, don't want that, do I? Be careful. Sounding center, the throat. This Zoom program is good, but you've got to check up to make sure that the document you're working on is actually the one that is recording. Okay. So he is occultly productive. Productivity having to do with the creation of various forms and states. So the life begins occultly to sound, and I'm going to kind of give that a yellow color. You know, obviously I'm fooling myself here. I'm pretending that I'm always able to get the right color for what I want to do, but I'm not. Maybe there's a way to find highlighting in any color, and I would really like that. Then I could be coloristically appropriate to what's being said, and a new hint would go forth. So anyway, he manifests forth and his sound goes out before him. Now this is an occult statement. DK tells us. His sound goes out before him. Now, sometimes overproductivity can be related to the third ray. There's so much activity, so much conception of the form that you do it beyond the measure of what is needed. And DK says of the related ray, the fifth ray, that the production of an excess of things is related to this fifth ray. Sometimes the fifth ray stands by itself, and sometimes it is the subsidiary, a subsidiary of the third. So his sound goes out before him, and let's say that we are known by the note which is sounding from us occultly, or subtly. Thus are we known. And it's not necessarily that we have to speak, the note speaks for itself. So this is an occult statement of fact, definitely apparent to those with the inner vision. And that's something that we all need to acquire and will be in the process of cultivation as we are cultivated by those who are externalizing now and who are leading, guiding humanity, and especially those who know who they are and can respond intelligently. That is the true disciples and initiates, of course. Coordination between the centers becomes apparent, and that is, what should we call it? Right rhythm. And rotation is intensified, and the centers themselves change in appearance, becoming unfolded. And the rotary movement becomes fourth dimensional, turning inward upon itself, and there, I'm sure, that we need to see it in order to appreciate it, because it's not something that maybe one can describe in words. I think there are some animations, basically, which give us hints in this direction. The centers are then radiating nuclei of light, and the corresponding four lower head centers are equally alive. So this takes us back to the first phase of of triangularization found in TCF 169 and 170. The first phase of, well, what can I call it? Here's where we are. Man partially controlled by the ego, advanced man. The heart, the throat, the head, and the four lesser centers. With their synthesis, the alta center, sometimes called alta major. Okay, we're moving forward. I have no idea where I am in terms of time due to that little Pac-Man mishap. And we go on to period 5. Okay. And now we come to this 5th division, wherein it looks like the head centers are considered all as one. So period 5 marks the application of the fire to the head centers and their complete awakening. So the head is considered as a unit. Now, you know, we're going to be dealing with all this in the coming centuries, and this is going to be a new science to which we will inevitably apply ourselves and gain thereby in our effectiveness in being of assistance to the hierarchy. I know we all want that. We want to be trained, you know, in such a manner that we can really be of use. Maybe I told you the story that Mary Bailey told me. You know, everybody has their interview when they come to work at the Arcane School. I had mine, and she kind of asked me my motive, and I don't know, it came to my mind that I wanted it to be useful, very simple thing. And she said that this is what Foster Bailey also wanted. He used to say, at least let me be useful. And of course he was. There's an example of the first ray fortifying a second ray ashram, even as the second ray ameliorates some of the harshness that would be found in a first ray ashram. Anyway, little aside there, you know. I'm filled with asides. Before initiation, all the centers will be rotating in a 4th dimensional order. But after initiation, they become flaming wheels and, seen clairvoyantly, are of rare beauty. So it must be a wonderful thing when all of this opens up to the truly clear internal perception. And as wheels turning upon themselves, as we've been told, but it is difficult to imagine, yet I have seen animations which seem to suggest that. And now that we have this kind of animative technology, I think we can come closer to seeing some kind of replica of what happens until we see with accuracy the real thing. And hopefully we don't have to go through too long a period where, in which we see without accuracy and claim it as accuracy. The fire of Kundalini is then awakened and is progressing in the necessary spirals. And what can I call it? As determined largely by the chromatic ray. At the second initiation, the emotional centers are similarly awakened, and at the third initiation, those on the mental plane are touched. Let's just say, however, these are lesser centers because the throat center, the heart center, the head centers are not to be found till later, when the angel of the presence is released. So basically, that angel of the presence, a projection, I think, of the solar angel, is the substitute for the chakras in the mental body that would normally be found on the three higher subplanes. The initiate can then stand in the presence of the king, the one initiator. So the stimulation of the mental centers is required before the third initiation, before the king can take place. Okay. These are the technicalities, okay? At the second initiation, a similar awakening. And do we have room for the technicalities? Well, you know, as we approach the third initiation, whatever our mental ray may be, the fifth ray will become important. Let's see, I'm going to make this a little more ocean-like. I'm fooling myself, of course, as I try these different colors. Okay. So always more awakening, and before initiation, and here he seems to indicate the very first initiation of the threshold, not the first solar initiation. Instead, what would we call it? The first planetary initiation of the threshold. Now, you know, many of us, we have passed this, but we should not underestimate its difficulty. It takes a long time to approach the possibility of even taking the first initiation of the threshold, and a long time, usually, before taking the second after the first has been taken. There's just so much glamour to clear up on this cosmically, personally oriented planet. Our planetary logos having a kind of problem of personality, an issue there. I seek to point out that the student must ever remember that here generalizations only are given. Maybe we can somehow intuit that a bit. As difficult as it may be to organize all this in somewhat tabulated form, it's just the ABC. The complexity in the development of the microcosm is as great as in the macrocosm. The awakening of the centers and their particular order is dependent upon several factors. But we cannot underestimate the collection of facts which is necessary to really understand this process. Now, you know, some people run away from that meticulous approach. Well, the Tibetan is really a master of the meticulous approach. He's a master of meticulous entirety. It's a second-ray method, but you know, it involves a fair amount of the fifth ray also, because we have to isolate the items of information. So we must isolate the many interrelated items of infinity information. I have so many little code words here. The awakening of the centers and their particular order is dependent upon several factors such as, this I mentioned, the ray of the spirit or monad. It, you know, this ray really guides the entire process. The ray of the ego, higher self or sun, or the sub-ray. And this sub-ray is not necessarily the ray, the personality ray, because there is on its own level, I gather, a sub-ray of the soul. Now, are we talking about the consciousness within the causal body, or are we talking about the consciousness within the spiritual triad, which is the true ego? But really, the rays are the same. There are two columns of ray indications to be considered when dealing with the spiritual triad. Cosmic Fire, page 177. And that right-hand column is basically indicating what the soul ray found as the ray of the causal body, or egoic lotus, what that will be. So there are a number of factors here that determine how the centers should awaken, or how they will awaken. And there are a lot of requirements and variations in that kind of awakening and opening. dependent on the monadic ray, the egoic ray, dependent on what else? So many things have to be taken into consideration. That's one of the things that we learn when studying this book, how much must be taken into consideration by the master assigning meditation and supervising meditation. The amount that must be considered is totally outside the range of what we as disciples are capable of understanding. So we have to grow into that kind of understanding, and I think, we have to be patient. Race and nationality are another factor. We're oftentimes told that the Oriental body is different from the Western body, and different approaches have to be used. The special type of work that has to be done, a man is an instrument. For what does he have to be equipped? Man, as a personality, is an instrument. For what specific type of work must he be equipped? Maybe if you're out there as a commando team under constant threat, it's not the same thing as being a teacher or a scholar in a university. It's not the same thing as being a business person or being an artist, let us say, or being a researcher laboriously. Laborious, it is that, I think. Or if you are an arouser of idealism and enthusiasm, again, not the same. Or an organizer, what's the job? That has to be understood. So the master assigning meditation has to know quite a bit about the one for whom the meditation is devised and to whom it is assigned. So this is all about the awakening of the centers and their particular order of awakening, dependent upon monad, ego, race, and nationality, the specific work to be done. Master DK knew his students very well. He actually had to study them. And of course, what does he advise us? Don't really get into doing the horoscope or ray chart of anybody unless you've studied them for 5 hours. Seems like a lot, but given our relatively slow degree of assimilating significance, it might take that long. And then 5, being in a way a number of the mind and also a number of the soul, might have a certain significance in terms of realization. We need realization to help others, and that quality that we really can't reach so well yet, called realization, is on the 5th subplane, 5th again, of the atmic plane, counting from above downward. And when I say from above downward, I simply mean counting or looking at, from a higher measure of frequency to a lower, rather than from the lowest measure of frequency to the higher. There are 2 counting points, as it were, in any plane. The very lowest frequency of that plane and the very highest, and you can start in either direction, either reducing from the highest or increasing from the lowest. And what else may be involved in awakening the centers in the right order? the application of the student. All right, what's that all about? And, you know, in a way, this is about the master's assessment, whether the student will make due application of the information which has been given to him. Now, I guess we can all look back upon our life and realize what a treasure we have been given. But have we made due application? In other words, application commensurate with the level of information we have been given. Now, at one point in human history, it didn't work out so well. It seemed that humanity was given so very much by the rulers, the god kings, the high initiates that may have been Kumaras or incarnated solar angels. And humanity didn't appreciate what they had been given and maybe took the gift for granted. And so after the war, a long time ago, maybe 4 million years ago, the hierarchy thought it best to withdraw and help man develop his own self-sufficiency, which to a point he has now done, and is ready for a new impartation, assuming then that he will not take such an impartation for granted, but will realize what it's like not to have such a gift, and will be more respectful of it. Okay. Now let's just see where we are with this. I think we have room to go on a little more, since for this particular program, time does not exist. So we're going to be looking at the fundamental centers of the average man. I hope this is not simply a mistaken cut and paste. I can tell shortly of the developed man and of the man on the path. Basically, we're here on page 76, and I think the best thing to do would be to make sure I can pull in an Alice Bailey book and go to Letters on Occult Meditation and go to page 76. Well, I think what I'll just do is I'll show it to you, because I don't have the diagrams themselves. There would be maybe a way to get them, but I'm not going to pause. I'm just going to show them to you, and the interesting geometry that is involved here. Suppose if I I see. So this would be a copy. And then I would try to paste it. Do I dare try that? Let's see. Insert. Maybe not. Well, as you see, something unusual happened. I succeeded actually in extracting the images from the Alice Bailey CD-ROM. So he seems to be summarizing here, and he's giving us the fundamental centers of the average man. So solar plexus, base of spine, and heart. And he's putting the majority on the left-hand side and the higher center on the right-hand side. And I think if I get now, this will help. Then he goes to a much more regular figure, which connects throat, heart center, and base of the spine. Again, the heart center is off to the right, which is interesting. And usually base of the spine is not the center connected with the throat center, but on the way to the head center, it certainly has to pass through, leaving, I suppose, some degree of vitalization. And it is an equilateral triangle, not a kind of scalene triangle. Is this other triangle? It's not even really a 3, 4, 5 triangle because it doesn't have a right angle. And this is the developed man, which who is mental. He is mental in his achievement. And the average man is emotional in his attainment. And now the fundamental centers of the man on the path. And this seems to be more in order, more in positional order, because the head centers, notice the plural, are the highest. The throat center is normally above the heart center, and the heart center again on the right, but lower down, interestingly, so occupying its proper position. So either this is a summary or it's going to be something, that has to do with what lies ahead. So hence you can see for yourself that it is useless to lay down rules for the development of the centers and to formulate methods whereby the fire can be circulated until such time as trained teachers with expert knowledge. He sometimes talks about the rays being capable or subject to expert diagnosis. It's the fifth ray quality here. Until such time as trained teachers with expert knowledge and clairvoyant faculty are in charge of the work on the physical plane. Clear enough, and I would say centuries ahead. Certainly we have to have the slow coming out of the masters. They have to be accepted, they have to be recognized, what they have to offer has to be received. Sometimes I think we go through great miseries as a human race simply in order to get us into the condition that we will listen. I think such a process is underway now because of the rampant materialism which has prevailed for so many decades, even centuries, even for the entire duration of human life in general. If that materialism is to be broken, well, it's not going to be an easy process, and man's clutching hands have to be pulled from that which he is grasping so tenaciously. So, I think we can be quite sure that these diagrams, they do have their point. And actually, when I look at all of them, really, they are arranged in positional order, which is something I failed to mention. So all these triangles are arranged in positional order. But it's interesting, the heart is the highest at first. And any chakra develops and has different functions in the process of its development. So the heart is the highest, then the heart is middling, and then the heart is the lowest, and the will and the head, in a sense, take over. It is not, says the Tibetan, desirable for aspirants to focus their thought on any one center. They run the risk of overstimulation or of attrition. They might, in fact, prevent that center from being duly receptive. They would create an imbalance in many cases. Earlier he said we don't wish to produce black masters who are relentless in their pursuit of their personal objectives and are expert in rendering into fact their personal objectives, which are actually against the progress of the plan. It is not wished that effort be made to turn the fire towards any particular point, maybe unless there is great supervision. In ignorant manipulation lies insanity, and a very old word here, fell disease. Fell. That is a word hundreds of years old and usually indicates the depths of evil or the approach to those depths. So we have an issue here of balance and of being wise enough to not to tamper with the process which nature itself will direct wisely. So let's say, do not tamper with a process. Whoops. Tamper. Somehow I've got my capitals all. Well, with a process which nature itself is meant to guide. All right. All right. Maybe we're going to do better now. Let's see. If the aspirant but seeks spiritual development, if he but aims at sincerity of purpose and at compassionate altruism, if he with serene application concentrates on the subjugation of the emotional body and the enlargement of the mental, and cultivates the habit of abstract thinking, seeing the relationship between many particulars in a large and general way, the desired results upon the centers will be produced from necessity, and danger will be eliminated. Well, the ambitious personality is so impatient. But if you stop to think about it, we've been alive forever, or we have been life forever, or we've been being forever. And our usual concepts regarding beginning and end and identity, all these concepts have to be quite radically adjusted, hopefully on the basis of real experience. That adjustment will occur, or, imperience, as I sometimes call it, to get rid of the X, because it's all happening within me, the capital M-E. So how many times has he warned us about ambitiously pushing our spiritual development by using unsanctioned methods? And will we have the wisdom to say, hey, this applies to me? This does apply. I'm thinking right now of our terrible pandemic situation where so many people have been misled into thinking that the coronavirus producing COVID-19, the disease, is simply a hoax. And then they get it, and they're shocked, and they basically say, you mean it wasn't a hoax? I've realized it wasn't a hoax. It's very real, and I'm going through the experience. And of course, this we can lay to the door of those who seek to manipulate others and who seek to retain power over the welfare, or in preference to the sacrifices needed to assure the welfare of others. It's extremely selfish. And comes from a very egotistical point of view, in which sincerity of purpose and compassionate altruism do not prevail, and the emotional body is not subjugated, and the mental body remains rigid and obstructive to the greater ideas. When these triangles are paths of threefold fire emanating from the base of the spine. When the interlacing, he uses words like that, intermingling, interlacing. Interlacing is complete, and the fire progresses along the path from center to center in the correct manner, as described above, starting with the ray of the monad and the design of progression determined by the ray of the monad, ray of the ego, and other factors that he lists. And when this is accomplished in the order required, yes, by the man's primary ray, then the work is accomplished. And that primary ray is the monadic ray, maybe the major monadic ray. Sometimes you can use the major ray of the monad, a phrase like that, and you can say to yourself, well, the monad is always the major ray. Or maybe you can say that the monad has a major ray and a minor ray, which does seem to be the case to explain the sevenfold monad and the threefold monad, and how each are said to exist, which would be a contradiction. So we are creating triangles of fire, and we do this not by manipulating the currents, unless some kind of special instruction is given. We do it in another way, as listed right here. We certainly seek the spiritual development. We are sincere in our purpose. We have a compassionately altruistic attitude. We apply what we know serenely to the astral body and subjugate it to a higher vehicle. We enlarge the mental body. We cultivate via the antakarana the habit of abstract thinking, and then the desired results will be produced. Now, do we believe it, or do we believe that somehow manipulation is required? Note that this order, the fivefold man, with these 5 centers listed, has attained perfection for this greater cycle, and the goal is reached. And what is that cycle? Is it a round or something more? A scheme round leading passage to the 5th chain, which next in order would be the Mercury chain for us. We're on the Earth chain. So maybe not so much is said, more is said about root races in our present round, and then a little bit about future chain rounds, which have not yet moved to the 5th chain, but are still part of the 4th chain. And then there's more to be said about the impending chains and the greater rounds that can be called scheme rounds and focus predominantly in one chain after another, but still observing, I would say, triangles between these chains within the planetary economy of energy. Note that this order has to be attained in the head centers likewise. So it's just a little hint with profound implications. Tomorrow, we will continue the study of the centers more specifically and somewhat describe them, pointing to the effect upon the life through the awakening of these wheels. You see, just to go in there and manipulate is not the same thing as having developed the quality which is associated with a greater increase in the activity of one of the centers. So it's better to work, in this case, from the qualitative angle, rather than to force the outer form into some kind of condition. That's how the left-hand workers work. They manipulate from the outside in. We're not doing that. We're trying to develop our understanding and our basic abilities, qualities, from the inside out. It may seem like a slower process, but it is a safer process, and it guarantees that we actually are, building something that will last. How many times have we done this? Well, you can't really put it in terms of time, because the sequence of universes in the great Mahamaya are beginningless and endless, and we're always centered between two infinitudes, going back and going forward, as if back and forward really existed, which ultimately they don't. But in terms of living the Mayavic life, as Shankara tells us, most mysterious is Maya and forever. In terms of living that life, we have to think about time and space and backward and forward. But we can outgrow that kind of thinking. And it's so different from our usual thought that when we try to think about what it would mean to outgrow that kind of thinking, we may have trouble getting it, trouble even touching what the effect would be of outgrowing the habitual common sense, which I think Einstein called the accumulation of prejudices up to the age of 18 or something like that. Everything we've been taught by our society, which is based on the concrete mind, and it puts us in a mental prison of illusion and misinterpretation. And to break through that, I think, comes with a real shock, because we discover that we thought we could break through it, but we really didn't have the slightest idea of what that meant. And yet we can prepare the way so that the breakthrough does occur. Okay, so we're going on to a new letter next time, the growth and development of the centers. I think we may find that here. We're on Page 77 looks like, just about page 77. And I would really like this document actually to save. And I'm going to even attempt to save it as well here as copy 1A. That's my hope. So, now I'll go back. And here we are back where we started from, and looks like we're going to page 77. That's how much we've done. About 4 pages. And now we'll go down to our stopping place. Hopefully. See, I did lose 2 programs in terms of the highlighting. Maybe it's not so necessary because the video exists, but you know, take a couple of hours to rebuild all that. So this is program 20, and we're on the 11th of August, and we basically have gone from page 73 to 77. And we'll begin with program number 21, whenever that may be. I always wish it would be on the same day. I think if I could just stay up all night, like I pretty much did last night, I could get these things done, but apparently sleep is needed. For some. Maybe Alice Bailey didn't get so much sleep. You know how those Gemini people are, they really manage on very little sleep. But the price is also paid. So on the XX of August, we will continue with program number 21 and page 77. And we'll be on a new letter, the growth and development of the centers. Such important material. Sometimes, I mean, you know, you can't really judge, but sometimes I think, you know, it was more important to read this book even than Initiation Human and Solar. But of course, Initiation Human and Solar gives the inspiration, you know, the sense of all these openings into new territories lying ahead. And so is meant to inspire people as well. The Tibetan knew. Inspire people first. The hierarchy works through inspiration. Okay. So, lots of love to everyone. And we just will proceed attempting to assimilate what is given in preparation for the 3rd installment of this series, threefold series of bridging treatises into the knowledge of the New Age and into the way of being under the Aquarian dispensation. So we'll see you soon, hopefully.